Hi everyone. In this video, we would be learning about chain of responsibility design pattern, which is one of the behavior design pattern. So first, let's start with the definition itself. The definition says that chain of responsibility design pattern is a behavioral design pattern that allows an object to pass a request along a chain of handlers. I know this has gone above the head. So let's try to understand this with the help of three examples. So let's assume that you have made a certain feature for your application and you have written a documentation on that so that it might help other developers in future to work on that feature. So this is you and this is the document, and now your document needs to be reviewed, and after review the person will be approving the document. Okay, so there are three kinds of persons. The first is team lead, second is manager, third is director. Now the problem is this document has certain authority, like this document can only be reviewed based on authority. For example, let's say the authority level of this document is 3. It means that any person who has authority greater than equal to 3 can only review that document and approve it. So basically, director is the only person who has authority greater than equals to 3. So only that director can approve the document. Let's come back to the definition. The definition says that this design pattern allows an object to pass a request. So this is the object or the sender, and this is the request. And we are passing that request along a chain of handlers. So this individual block that you are seeing is nothing but the handler. Handler is basically a class which will process the request. So this object will pass the request through the chain of handlers like this. Now, if the documentation's authority level is 2, it means that this document will be passed to the team lead. Team lead will check whether he is eligible for approving the document or not. So over here, team lead is not eligible to approve the document. So this document will be forwarded to the manager. The manager will again check whether he is eligible for approving the document or not. And over here, manager is eligible, right? So manager will approve the document and we will stop. Okay. Once any handler is executed completely, we will stop the chain. So this is all about chain of responsibility design pattern. Okay. But let's try to understand this design pattern with the help of couple of examples more. And by the way, I did research on chain of responsibility design pattern, and I found that there are three types of there are three modification or two modification on this design pattern. So this type one that we saw just now is the one that is traditional. Okay, so this is the one where only one handler will be executed completely. That is this handler if the documentation's authority level is 2. Now in the second example, again, let's assume that you are appearing for your interviews in a specific company, and that company has 3 rounds. First is technical interview, second is bar raiser interview, and third is HR interview. And so this is the sender, and this are the receivers, and this is the request. Let's say your resume is the request. So this will be passed to each and every round. Okay. So first, this will be passed to the technical interview. Here, the interviewer will give you a specific score, and if that score is greater than the threshold, then you would move to the next round. Okay, that is bar raiser round. Again, the interviewer will take your interview and give you a score. If the score, let's say if the score is not greater than threshold. So the process, this chain will stop here itself. So over here, if you observe, we have executed the technical interviewer's handler. I mean, we have executed this handler. Then we have executed this handler as well. The name of the second type we can say is chain breaker. So in this second type, we will be executing all the handlers until we will fail the interview. Okay. So all the handlers will be executed and one of the handler will be responsible for stopping that chain. So this was the second type. Now in the third type, what we'll do is we'll be passing the request through all the handlers. So this message, so let's assume that we want to log this message into console, into file and into email. So we would send this message to each and every handler one by one, and all of them will execute the code. That is, all of them will log that message into their appropriate locations like console, file or email. So the type 3 was all the handler will be executed. Right. Now the common confusion between the type 3 and the decorator design pattern can be like, in the decorator design pattern also we add the different behaviors. That is, if you take this example, that is plain pizza. In the pizza you are adding the cheese and then you are also adding the sauce, right? So you are adding the behaviors in the decorator design pattern. So here also you are adding the behaviors, isn't it? That is, the message is logged to the console, it is then logged to the file, it is then logged to the email. So what's the difference between this type 3 and the decorator? This might be the common confusion. So the answer is, in the decorator design pattern, the initial object or the original object, which is pizza, okay, this is the original object. So this original object is modified. That is, plain pizza will now become cheese pizza and it will now become sauce cheese pizza. Right. So you are adding the behaviors and you are modifying the object, initial object. Whereas in the chain of responsibility design pattern, this message, which is the original message, is sent to this handler. It is also sent to this handler and it is also sent to this handler. So in the chain of responsibility design pattern, the original request will not be modified. Whereas in the decorator design pattern, it would be modified. So that's the difference between this type 3 and the decorator design pattern. So I hope now you understood what is a chain of responsibility design pattern. We have also seen different types of this design pattern and we have seen the difference between the type 3 and the decorator design pattern. Now coming to when to use this design pattern. So whenever you are trying to solve a problem and you think that there can be a chain like structure, then you can think about this design pattern. Okay, this was the first point. For the second point says that the sender does not know about the receiver. It means that you want to decouple the sender from the receiver. So for example, over here, this document had authority level 2. It means that manager will approve that document. But assume that your company decides that they don't need this manager role going further. So they remove that role. So now if the authority level of this document is 2, it means that director will review and approve that, isn't it? So here you are not certain about the receiver, that is your sender is not certain about the end receiver. So In such cases, you might opt for chain of responsibility design pattern. And the third point is you can have 0 or more receivers. So for example, here we saw that we had 3 receivers, that is all the receivers. Here we had 2 receiver, here we had 1 receiver, right? So when we had 0 or more receivers, in that case, we can use this chain of responsibility design pattern. Now, if you might ask that, give me an example where you are sure about the receiver. So the example can be, let's say the user controller is sure about the user service, and user service is sure about user repository, right? So each and every sender over here is having a specific receiver. So in that case, we don't need chain of responsibility design pattern. But in such cases where you are not confirmed about the receiver, it can be anyone. So there you should use chain of responsibility design pattern. So now I hope you understood this question, that is, when to use chain of responsibility design pattern. Now the main part is the UML diagram. So see, in the UML diagram we have this abstract handler. So this is the abstract class, and this abstract class has 3 functions and 1 handler, 1 variable. So this variable will be used by each and every concrete handlers. So this concrete handler will be extending the abstract handler. This concrete handler will also be extending the abstract handler. Each and every concrete handler will have a reference to the next handler, right? So the better naming for this handler could be next handler. So concrete handler 1 will have the reference to the next handler, which is concrete handler 2. And this reference is stored into this variable. Okay. And it is stored with the help of this setter. So this concrete handler will call the setter function, and using this setter function, it will assign the next of this handler 1 as handler 2. Okay, basically it will point to the concrete handler 2 with the help of this next handler function. And this call next will go from one handler to second handler. So it is like linked list. We are standing at the head over here, and then we are moving to the second node. So we are moving to the second node with the help of this call next function. And this is the function which will be implemented by each and every concrete handler, where the main logic will be residing. And the name of the function can be anything. Currently I've used handle request, but it can be anything. This function will be responsible for handling the request. For example, this console logger will have that handle request function, and it will have the logic to log this message to the console. Similarly, this file logger will have the same function, but the logic would be to log the message to the file, and so on and so forth. Okay. So now I hope you understood the UML diagram of this design pattern, and the client will just start the chain. Okay. It will just start the process. We'll understand this with the help of code. So let's go to the code section. So this is the code for the type 2 where we had the interview process. So over here we have this interview handler, which is the abstract class, and this handler will have the reference to the next handler in the chain. So each and every concrete handlers will have this next variable because this is protected. Okay. And we are setting this next with the help of this setter function. Okay. So the technical interview will have the next as the bar raiser interview. Bar raiser interview will have a next as the behavior interview. And this call next will just call the higher function or the handle request function of the next handler in the chain. That is, technical interview will call the higher function of the bar raiser interview. Bar raiser interview will then call the higher function of the behavior interview once it has executed their own higher function. And if there is no such handler, we will just print this message. And by the way, this is nothing but the handle request function which we saw in the UML diagram. I've just used this name for better naming convention as per the example that we are working on. And this function will be implemented by each and every concrete handlers. So in the technical interview, we have this higher function. Here we are printing this message. Then we are then the interviewer will give the score. According to score, if the score is greater than equals to threshold, then we are again logging some messages and we are calling the higher function of the next handler. That is this. And we are repeating the similar process. Only thing is the threshold is greater over here in this bar raiser interview. And similar process is repeated in the behavior interview as well. And I have created one extra class just to build the chain. So this is the chain variable and I have assigned the technical interview as the head of the chain, and the next is the bar raiser interview, and the next of bar raiser interview is behavior interview. Okay, and finally we are triggering the chain using chain.higherCandidate. So the higher function of technical interview will be called, which will process the higher function, which will execute the higher logic, and then it will call the higher function of the bar raiser interview. Then bar raiser interview will again execute the logic for the higher function, and it will then call the higher function of the behavior interview. So this process will keep on going until the last handler or whenever the candidate get rejected. So we will just use this start function in the main.java. So here I have created the object of this process and we are calling the start, and this is the name of the candidate that we are passing. So let's execute the code. So this is the first round. Here the interviewer will give the score. Let's say interviewer gives 80. So LS will pass to the next round. Now let's say LS gets 100 score. Again, LS will move to the next round. Again, LS will now move to the next round. And if there is no next round, then we will log this message. Okay. Now let's again run the code and try to fail LS. So let's say LS gets 100 score in the first round, but LS gets 60 in the bar raiser round. So we are terminating the chain here itself because LS has not passed this interview. Okay. So now I hope you understood the chain of responsibility design pattern and the various types of chain logic. So if you did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.